Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today. The topic for today's webinar is state strategies for working with low-income community groups on solar. This webinar is being presented by the Clean Energy States Alliance, also known as CESA. We have a number of excellent guest speakers with us today, as well as our host for this webinar, Nicole Hernandez-Hammer. And our speakers are from Oregon and Rhode Island. We're going to be passing this over to them in just a moment. Before I do that, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our attendees today are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of the webinar. You can connect using a telephone, or you can call in using your computer mic and speakers. If you'd like to minimize the webinar console, you can do that using the little orange arrow that you see circled here. You can also use that to expand the webinar console. Very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions and your comments as you think of them throughout the webinar by typing them into the question box and hitting send. We are going to save about 15 or so minutes at the end of the webinar for a Q&A with the audience, and we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. We do expect to have a lot of people on the line, which probably means a lot of questions, so to make sure that we get to your question, type it in when you think of it. Don't wait until the very end to type your question in. Finally, this webinar is being recorded. We will send you an email within about 24 hours with a link to the webinar recording and a copy of the slides. And we'll also be posting those materials on our website at cesa.org/webinars. And that's a good website to know because it's also where we post info about our upcoming webinars. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to our host for today's webinar, Nicole Hernandez-Hammer. As I said, Nicole is a project director here at the Clean Energy States Alliance, and she is going to tell you a bit more about CESA and about our webinar today. Nicole?
Thank you, Sam. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have two great presenters with us today. In order to allow enough time for our speakers to present and for our audience to have plenty of time to ask questions, I'll share some quick introductions and then we'll jump right in. First, I'd like to introduce our organization, the Clean Energy States Alliance, CESA. We are a national nonprofit coalition of public agencies and organizations working together to advance clean energy. CESA members are mostly state agencies. You can see a list of our members on your screen right now. This webinar is part of our work for the Department of Energy's States Energy Strategies Grant. Starting in 2017, this grant provides CESA and its state partners support to create more access to solar in low and moderate income communities across Washington, D.C. and 5 states, Minnesota, Connecticut, New Mexico, Oregon, and Rhode Island. To learn more about this and other CESA projects, please visit our website. Let's get to our presentations. I will introduce each presenter before they present. First up, we have Shauna Beland. Shauna is Chief of Program Development for the State of Rhode Island's Office of Energy Resources, known as OER. Shauna works on a range of initiatives at OER related to renewable energy programs and policy. These include implementing solar PV, energy storage and community solar programs, ensuring renewable energy quality assurance, designing new programs to improve solar access on previously disturbed land such as brownfields and carports, and increasing solar access among low and moderate income customers. In addition, she leads OER's workforce development efforts related to renewable energy and manages Rhode Island's annual Clean Energy Industry Report and the Clean Energy Internship Pilot Program. Shauna is chair of the Rhode Island chapter of New England Women in Energy and the Environment. Thank you for joining us today, Shauna.
Thanks, Nicole. The Rhode Island focus of this grant effort is on community solar. OER has been working on some great things related to community solar, so thank you for this opportunity to hear about our efforts. And thank you to CESA as well for this opportunity. In March of 2017, Governor Raimondo announced a strategic goal to increase the amount of clean energy in the state by 10 times by the end of 2020. Our commissioner likes to say this is a goal for December 31st of 2020 and not January 1. This goal is helping to achieve a total of 1,000 megawatts of clean energy projects. We're well on target to meet this goal by December of 2020. 173 megawatts of solar has been connected to the distribution system here in Rhode Island, and community solar makes up a very small piece of that, but it is a growing sector. Many people in this audience might already know what community solar is, but I'll just give a brief overview. A community solar project is a large solar farm shared by more than one household. Its primary purpose is to allow members of a community the opportunity to share the benefits of solar power, even if they cannot install solar panels on their own property. Project participants, or subscribers, benefit from the electricity generated by the community solar project, which costs less than the price they would ordinarily pay for electricity. Through community solar programs, renters, homeowners, and nonprofits can participate in clean energy projects across Rhode Island. Rhode Island is lucky because we only have one utility, National Grid. So any rate code or any ratepayer in Rhode Island, with the exception of two very tiny municipal light plants, have the opportunity to participate in community solar across the state. Two new community solar programs became available in Rhode Island in mid-2017. The 30-megawatt virtual net metering pilot and the Renewable Energy Growth Program, also known as Community Remote Distributed Generation, or CRDG, because we need an acronym for everything. Both programs have proved to be popular among installers across the state. Approximately 28 megawatts of virtual net metered projects and 6 megawatts of CRDG projects for a total of 34 megawatts are currently under development in National Grid's territories. In 2019, for the first time, Rhode Island will have community solar projects available for a limited number of customers to subscribe to. Unfortunately, there is no low and moderate income carve-out in either of these two incentive programs, which is something our office will be diligently working on in the coming years and hopefully coming months for the 2020 legislative session. The first Rhode Island community solar project recently became operational. In fact, it was just last week. It was a beautiful sunny day for a solar ribbon cutting. This project is in Burrillville, which is in the northwestern part of Rhode Island. And it was a great event with many people who are actually subscribing to the community solar project. And we were really excited to see the first project come online here in Rhode Island. After program design, what were the next steps for our grant strategy? An important step was meeting with the solar developers who were planning on installing community solar projects across the state. We met with most of the developers that are currently in the interconnection queue. During our discussions with them, they indicated a willingness in participating in low and moderate income outreach initiatives and would consider sharing their subscriber contracts with community partners for input. Being able to share those types of contracts is a really important component of our plan going forward. Having them provide lots of transparency to customers who might be subscribing to their projects with providing their contracts up front is something that we feel pretty strongly that they should provide and be able to publish in advance to customers signing those types of contracts. Arcadia is the company that most community solar developers have partnered with so far on subscriber management. So we've been reaching out to both Arcadia as well as the solar developers. Conversations with developers will continue into 2020, not only for their updates on their various projects, but also to involve them early on in discussions related to expanding the existing programs. What is working? What isn't working? How can we address the lack of an LMI carve-out here in Rhode Island? Most importantly, how can we improve the current programs to ensure that all Rhode Island residents have an opportunity to participate in community solar? In order to understand how the residential sector specifically the LMI sectors, think about community solar and solar in general, we conducted a series of online surveys. The survey was sent out to over 11,000 customers, in specifically low and moderate income National Grid customers. We had nearly 600 responses, and this is considered a pretty significant response rate for Rhode Island compared to just the average 1 to 3% response rate that we typically get for National Grid surveys. There were some key findings from the survey. Not surprisingly, financial benefits matter most. Lower energy costs is the most important benefit for participation in community solar, but environmental issues are particularly important as well. While all believe that reducing pollution is important, those who are more inclined to participate in community solar find it very important for the state to significantly increase the amount of renewable energy we bring onto the grid in order to displace fossil fuels, which is something that our office is working towards every day. Another outcome from the survey is it was very clear that more information is needed. Over half don't know where to begin. While trying to find more information about solar energy, 1/3 of those who are interested are just waiting for an opportunity. So it became clear from polling these 600 folks that education is really needed going forward to provide more education about community solar and some of the other programs that we offer here in Rhode Island. Another outcome was it's best to partner with state and local governments as a trusted information source. Over half finds that state and local government websites are the most trusted source of information about clean energy. And the results of the survey helped us come up with our next step, which is to create a community solar marketplace here in Rhode Island. So we've been working on going out to bid. As any of you who are familiar with state government, the procurement process can sometimes take a long time. But we're happy to report that hopefully we will have a vendor on board soon, and a beta version for our website will be available in October and a live version ready in November. The marketplace is a place where potential community solar customers can go and learn more about projects in the state that might actively be subscribing customers. It will provide resources such as information about consumer protection, the benefits and savings from participating in a community solar project, and details about how community solar works with the 2 incentive programs in the state. The next step in our strategy is to partner with community groups to help educate Rhode Islanders about community solar. We wanted to make sure that low and moderate income groups were included with our outreach and education campaigns. Based on the survey results, we learned that many of these groups go to other community groups as a trusted source of resources, or trusted source for resources in their daily lives. With that in mind, we created 3 partnerships. The first is with Pawtucket and Central Falls. These 2 communities are located in the middle of Rhode Island and are very urban. Working with the nonprofit Groundworks Rhode Island on community outreach is our plan for Pawtucket and Central Falls. Planning community meetings with the Cape Verdean Community Development Center, because there is a high population or a large population of Cape Verdeans in this particular area in Rhode Island. They have a monthly breakfast that has over 200 attendees. And so we'll be planning on visiting and presenting at one of their meetings in early 2020 to talk about community solar opportunities. OER has a long-standing relationship with the City of Providence's Sustainability Office, which is our next partner. We are planning on partnering with them on a series of train-the-trainer efforts. By educating key people in the community in Providence about community solar, they will then go out to various community groups and spread the word about community solar opportunities, along with other information related to energy, such as energy efficiency and tips on saving money on electricity bills. Our third partnership is with the Basic Needs Network in Washington County, which is in the southern part of the state and is very rural. They're an organization focused on getting people the necessary information and resources to get their lives on track. Things including driver's licenses, how to move furniture from point A to point B, how to turn on their electricity, get cable, internet, etc. We created a brochure for them to provide to their customers who turn to them for information about electricity needs. This brochure was created in both English and Spanish, specifically related to community solar opportunities in the state. They helped provide input, the Basic Needs Network helped provide input into the brochure, and we're close to a final draft with their feedback. So that pretty much wraps up all of our efforts on the strategy to date. There'll definitely be more to come, and so stay tuned about what's happening in Rhode Island. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have at the end of the webinar.
Thank you, Shauna. I will say that I've had the good fortune to work closely with Shauna, and it's been wonderful to see how a state agency can have quite a bit of success creating meaningful relationships with local environmental justice groups in a relatively short period of time. Next, we have Betsy Coffman. Betsy heads up Energy Trust of Oregon's renewable energy sector, which provides cash incentives and technical assistance to solar, hydro, biopower, geothermal, and wind projects in Oregon. The program has funded more than 15,000 commercial, residential, and large-scale solar projects, and more than 20 hydro, bio, and geothermal projects. Prior to joining Energy Trust, Betsy worked at For the Sake of the Salmon, where she managed the Salmon Friendly Power Program, one of Oregon's first programs to allow utility customers to choose a renewable power option. Thank you for being with us today, Betsy.
Thank you. I am going to talk to you about the outreach and engagement work that we have been doing in Oregon for the past 3 years. We've been working to develop some systems for getting benefits of solar to low and moderate income families. This slide shows you the process that we have been following. I will go over it piece by piece. I do want to credit my colleagues, Zach Sipple and Lizzie Rubidoux. This definitely was a group effort over the past few years. So over the past 3 years, as you can see from some of the boxes here, we've had community gatherings. We did 2 iterations of a focused working group. We developed and finalized a set of strategies. And most recently, we have distributed innovation grants to community groups to come up with their own program models for deploying solar for low and moderate income families. And as we moved along this process, we were trying to build capacity in community organizations and empower them to do more of the thinking about how best to do this. I'd like to put this process in some context, in the context of the spectrum of public participation from the International Association of Public Participation. And what you see here in this framework going from left to right is increasing influence from the community over decisions. You might already be familiar with this framework. If you're not, I would recommend Googling it and learning more about it. It's a very good framework for looking at community engagement. I was not familiar with this framework when we started. I learned about it about a year ago, and after learning about it, I realized that we had been unknowingly trying to move along the spectrum, trying to move from informing to involving and collaborating up to some level of empowerment. So I'd like to go back through our process piece by piece and tell you what we did. And I would like to say at the beginning that when we started this, we did not know what we were doing. We did not have good ideas for increasing solar deployment for low and moderate income families. We did not have a good sense of community priorities, and we didn't know how we were going to engage people. So we started by doing something that we did know how to do, which is that we held some come one, come all community meetings. We had 4 of those in various places around the state. We had speakers from the Oregon Department of Energy, the Oregon Public Utility Commission, which was doing outreach at the time for the very beginning of the state's community solar program. And we also had presentations at these meetings from 2 clean energy nonprofits. We had about 30 or 40 people attend each meeting. We had a meal from a local caterer, and after presentations, we broke into small groups to talk about people's priorities for how solar could be used to benefit low and moderate income families. And we got several really good results from these meetings. First of all, we learned about what communities value, what's important to people. And also, we got our first list. We got an initial list of who was interested in becoming more involved in this effort. So we took that list and we used that to create our first solar working group, Solar Work Group 1.0. And this group met regularly, about once a month for about 8 months. We had presentations and discussions. The group learned about solar and batteries. We looked at housing, workforce development. We provided scholarships to some of the organizations to enable them to take the time to participate. And we always provided lunch. That was very important. It's an opportunity to network and build relationships. And we used local caterers from different backgrounds and had some really great food. This is who was in that group. And obviously, if you don't live in Oregon, you may not recognize the specific names here, but as you can see from the categories, that we had a lot of energy groups and a lot of government agencies. And at that time, we were really still learning how to break out of our own bubble. One important accomplishment from this group was that they worked with us on developing a draft set of strategies for deploying solar for the benefit of low and moderate income families. We took that draft set of strategies and we went back out on the road. And for those of you on the West Coast, this is Oregon. This is, and you can see from here the places that we went. This time, we met with people individually. Instead of having these come one, come all meetings, we had individual meetings. The goal of these conversations was to get input on our strategies and to develop some next steps. And again, as you can see from the map, we went all over the state. We met with about 30 different organizations that fell into these categories. And what we did in these conversations is we treated each one as kind of an opportunity to test some hypotheses. For example, we would say to people, well, we think that maybe funding is an issue. So what if we just put more money on the table? Or what if we provided technical assistance? Would that be helpful in helping you to develop solar projects? And the result of all of these conversations was that we revised our strategies, and the final strategies ended up looking different from the draft set, and we were able to move on to implementation. So one of the key strategies that we had was to continue building capacity in community organizations for doing solar. And in order to do that, we created a new solar working group, 2.0. And this time, we really wanted to get beyond the energy organizations. And we worked with a DEI consultant to help us develop an outreach list. We put out a solicitation looking specifically for groups that served low-income families, communities of color, rural areas, and tribes. And again, we offered scholarships to help people participate. So this is who we got the second time around. We also had some energy groups and government agencies, but you can see from this list that we did have some improvement in getting participation from a broader set of voices, and we were able to hear from a wider group of people in Workgroup 2.0 compared to the first one that we had done. So this group, like the other one, met about monthly for a somewhat shorter period of time. This group met for about 6 or 7 months. And these are some of the topics that we covered. We wanted to get these groups to the point where they could start to consider how they might get involved in solar energy. We covered net metering, system capacity, production costs, incentives. We looked at different housing types that low and moderate income families are living in, and various approaches to rooftop, multifamily, community solar. We covered a real gamut of topics. We also gave people in the group work to do. We like to say we put the work in work group. This is a sample worksheet that participants worked on to learn about costing a solar project. We divided people into small groups. They pulled out their calculators and they went to work. As you can see, we provided some numbers and we had people calculate expected generation and bill savings from a project of a given size. This one is for a multifamily project, but we also did worksheets for residential and commercial. People had a lot of fun with this, and it provided some really good information. At the same time as the work group was meeting, kind of on a parallel process, we were on a separate track, also distributing small innovation grants to help community groups develop their own programs and projects. We offered up to $10,000 per grant for groups to develop program models. We awarded 9 grants. They ran the gamut, both in geography, they were spread all over the state, and in the kinds of financing models they were using and the types of projects. It was a real blend of single family, multifamily, some community solar projects. And we also had all of the grantees present to Workgroup 2.0 toward the end of that group's work to workshop their concepts and get feedback from the work group. These innovation grants really capped off this effort to build capacity and empower community groups to develop their own solar programs tailored to their own needs. I would like to give a few examples of some of the innovation grants that we're working on. I'd like to just highlight 3 of these that are the furthest along to give you a taste of what came out of this effort. This first one is being done by a community group in partnership with a community development nonprofit. The community group is Douglas County Smart Energy, that's in Southern Oregon, and they're working with NeighborWorks Umpqua. NeighborWorks Umpqua owns a manufactured home park, and what they're doing in this grant is they're putting a solar system on the roof of the community building at the manufactured home park, and they're sharing the financial benefits from that solar system with 5 of the park tenants. And they're using a matrix of needs to determine who will benefit and who will be able to share in those financial benefits. And we see this as being a pretty replicable model. In the second example, the African American Alliance for Home Ownership in Portland is adding solar education to its classes. And they're also looking at using individual development accounts as a way for homeowners to save money to purchase solar after they already own a home. These individual development accounts, IDAs, are very intriguing. With those, people can put aside money and get a government funding match of 3 to 1 for a variety of things like college tuition or a car to get to work, things that help people improve their circumstances. And the idea of being able to potentially use this for solar so that they can get long-term bill reduction is something really interesting. The third innovation grant example I want to highlight is a partnership between a nonprofit, a group called Seeds for the Soul, and they're partnering with 2 Habitat for Humanity chapters and the Oregon Clean Power Cooperative. If you're familiar with Oregon at all, this is in the Corvallis area, and they're focused on 20 existing Habitat for Humanity houses. And what they're doing is they're aggregating these projects so that the co-op can step in and monetize the federal tax credit. They're also getting donations from the community to help fund these projects, as well as zero interest loans from the community, kind of neighbor to neighbor loans. And they're also getting really good pricing from their local solar contractor. So what, after this 3-year engagement effort, what did we learn? First, it's important to get really connected. All of these conversations and eating meals together and hitting the road all created opportunities for really learning and getting to know people, getting to know communities, developing relationships. And there really is no substitute for that. The amount of knowledge and information that we gained from talking to lots of people and creating lots of opportunities for connection was just extremely valuable for us and enabled us to develop some programs that we think are very helpful, and there's no substitute for that kind of in-person engagement. Second thing that we learned is that you really need to make an effort to make participation happen. Community groups are really busy, and we needed to make it worth their time to focus on solar. And we really tried to use their time very wisely and make these meetings as valuable as we could. We offered scholarships for both work groups to value people's time, and we tried to make the meeting content really relevant. And we did a lot of checking in with people on what they wanted to hear about and whether we were hitting the mark, and just trying to really make an effort to help them participate in as meaningful a way as they could. Third lesson, can't really stress this one enough, is listen. And I will give you an example that stands out for me from the first meeting of Workgroup 2.0. At that meeting, we were planning to talk about the state's community solar program. This program has a 10% low income carve out, and we really wanted to discuss that program with this group. So we put that on the agenda for the first meeting, and the group got really upset with us. The statement that I remember someone saying was, we barely know about solar and you're trying to talk to us about a timeshare. And so we took a break from that meeting and reconnoitered, and we ended up dropping that agenda item and switching to a discussion about why people wanted to get involved with solar. Because it was pretty clear that it was just too soon, and the group really let us know that that was not what they wanted to talk about at that point. We ended up coming back to community solar 6 months later and had a great discussion about it, but that was after the group had gone through a lot more education. That first meeting was just not the time, and so you really do need to be willing to revise your plans, change what you think you're doing, because your ideas may not be what other people are thinking that they want to hear about at any given moment. And then finally, we learned that we need to facilitate others in developing their own solutions and innovating. We pretty quickly in this process learned that we don't have answers. We certainly don't have all the answers, and being able to support community groups in developing their own solutions was something that we ended up putting a very high priority on, and we're really enjoying the results of that. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about this. We really love doing this work, and it's really good to talk about it.
Thank you, Betsy. I know a lot of the work that you're doing has inspired many of our CESA state members, and they're seeing great benefits to the LMI work they're doing as a result. So thank you very much. We will now go into the Q&A portion of our webinar. Please continue to type in your questions for our presenters. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. Our first question is for Shauna. Is the community solar project in Rhode Island a true community-owned array, or is this owned by a developer or utility that simply subscribes users? direct community ownership seems to be a highly desired feature.
So the projects, the 34 megawatts that we're seeing in National Grid's interconnection queue, with the exception of the one that is already operational, are direct purchase projects. They're not owned by third-party ownership models. We see third-party ownership projects are allowed in Rhode Island, but from my understanding and conversations with these developers, they are direct purchase projects.
Thank you. The next question we have is for Betsy. What do you think attributed to having more community groups involved during 2.0 workshop? Was it the individual meetings? What do you define as individual meetings, one-on-one, or one community group at a time?
I'll cover that in two pieces. The one-on-one meetings that we had where we run around the state with our draft strategies, we met with CAP agencies, community development corporations, solar contractors, and we met with one or two people at a time. So it wasn't us in front of a group, speaking. We were having conversations over lunch and really kind of having a lot of back and forth in those meetings. In our work group 2.0, where that was a set of people that we convened on a monthly basis, had 3-hour meetings where always involved lunch and presentations and discussions, and that group got to know each other over the course of time. We called that our solar work group. I think the key to getting a wider set of voices on that one was we compiled our outreach list better. We did a better job of talking to people about how to, giving us lists of housing agencies and nonprofits, groups working in communities of color. And we worked with a DEI consultant very specifically to help us do that kind of outreach. And we also, we didn't ask for any solar experience at all. All we wanted was some interest, and we offered scholarships right off the bat on that one. We said that we would pay people $3,000 to attend 6 meetings and do a little bit of preparation before those meetings. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. The next question we have is for Shauna. Does Rhode Island still offer a developer incentive for LMI participants? I seem to remember it was a few $100s per participant. If so, is there any data on how many LMI participants might be taking advantage of that incentive?
So the program the question is getting to is our Community Renewables Program, which I did not touch upon during my discussion. It's a program that's run by the Renewable Energy Fund at Commerce, Rhode Island. It's a program with $600,000, first come, first serve. And the way that program works is it was really designed back in 2018 to help with the upfront costs and the administrative burden for community solar developers to subscribe customers. It hasn't really worked out that way, but that was the original intent. The program would give LMI program participants $500 and regular National Grid rate code customers, the A16 rate code customers, $300 if they signed up on a community solar project. So we haven't paid out any of those yet. I feel that one of the reasons we suspect that we haven't given any of those grants out yet is the developers are still in the process of subscribing customers, and so they don't want to send us the list of all of those customers, because when they send it, it's sort of in stone, and that's kind of a pretty serious next step for them to disclose who their customers are for their solar projects. So we expect that we'll probably have our first one paid out by the end of the year, especially since we have one project online already, and so that solar developer for that project that is online in Burrillville has applied to that program, so was just waiting to get their customer list to process payments. So it is available, and it will continue to be until we've fully subscribed or gone through all of the $600,000.
The next question we have is for both presenters, but we'll start with Betsy. what are some tactics government agencies use to engage community-based organizations?
I'm not as, we're a nonprofit, and I'm not as familiar with what tactics government agencies generally use. I can tell you that I know that for us, with the big community meetings that we had 2 government agencies involved in that, and they really loved the opportunity to go out and meet with folks. I have seen some government agencies really do an effective job of meeting with community organizations to learn what community needs are and to allow them to develop some of their own programs with great effect. There's some really great work being done up in King County on developing local health boards that are run by community organizations that have been incredibly effective. But I don't work in government, and so I don't have a really solid answer to the various tactics that government agencies generally use.
In Rhode Island, it's a pretty small state. I like to say that there's only 3 degrees of separation between any Rhode Islanders instead of the normal 7. So everybody knows everybody here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we know all of the right people to engage for any of our efforts. However, we do have rather robust stakeholder lists for our solar developers and then as well for our energy efficiency programs. We, through our CAP agencies with the energy efficiency programs and engagement with National Grid, we do go out into the community quite often to solicit feedback about how programs are working. I'm less familiar with how the energy efficiency programs engage the customers directly or community groups, but on the solar side, a lot of the solar developers are approached by, for example, church or faith-based organizations to put solar on the roof. And so that's sort of an avenue into engagement with some of those community groups because often they get connected to our office through that. So it's a little, it's not an actual strategy. It's a little bit more organic than just direct outreach. But I'd say that our stakeholder list is growing by the day as a result of some of those things.
Yeah, I'd like to add one more thing that the State Public Utility Commission, which is operating our community solar program, has set up 4 subcommittees from the community to work on helping to vet policy for the community solar effort. And those groups meet on a regular basis and have conference calls, and they've been getting some pretty good public input using that method.
Next question is for Shauna. How are renters able to become subscribers? So I guess maybe if you could talk a little bit about what kind of renters are the best fit for community solar.
Sure. So because Arcadia is the single subscriber management company right now in Rhode Island, and we expect to see more as these projects continue being developed across the state, their business model is sort of a blanket approach, regardless of income, demographic, renters, homeowners, condos. They're really trying to get the message out about community solar to all Rhode Island residents. And given my inbox, I would say that they're being very successful related to that. So I think renters are just a part of their overall marketing campaign, but they're not targeted in any specific way that I understand in conversations with Arcadia.
Thank you. Our next question is for Betsy. Have any of the community members or projects run into unexpected obstacles as they have worked on their solar projects?
Yes, I would say that we all have on some of those, but there have been a couple in particular. One of the 9 that we distributed did have to cancel because they were working with a multifamily property owner who decided that this just wasn't the time for him to go forward. So getting that kind of cooperation was a little bit challenging with regard to that one. Working out the financial models on these things, I think, was a little more daunting than some of these projects expected. Figuring out, exactly how you set up a system where you can monetize the federal tax credit has proven a little bit more challenging than we thought on some of these. That's one thing. And then the endless problem that I think anyone who works in this space is familiar with, which is the utility allowance, where people's utility bills are limited to a certain percentage of their monthly expenses for rent and utilities. And so basically what it means is that if you lower someone's utility bill, then in a low-income multifamily property, then they can raise the rent. And so how do you lower someone's utility bill and get meaningful benefit from that, so it isn't just like robbing Peter to pay Paul? So that's continues to be a challenge. Also, the community solar program is taking a little longer than we thought to roll out, and so some of the projects are kind of on hold while they wait for that to move along.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is for Shauna. How are you going to make people aware of the community solar marketplace?
Oh, that's a great question. So our brochure that we're working on with the Basic Needs Network will definitely have it. We're also rolling out a new About Solar section of our website. So we hope to include a whole section on community solar on that page that will link directly to the community solar marketplace. We're also planning on doing we have a residential guide for going solar. We plan on sort of adding an appendix to that document for community solar. And every year, Rhode Island has a pretty big energy expo. I would say probably 40,000 people, which is pretty big for Rhode Island, filter through that energy expo over the course of 4 days. And that's our really big event for the year for getting information out to the public. So there will be lots of opportunity to talk about our community solar website to folks. And I believe that'll be in spring of 2020 is the next one.
Great. Next question is for Betsy. Have any additional groups that did not receive grants expressed interest in doing a project?
Not yet. We have had groups that are wondering if we're going to do another solicitation, although some of those are groups that we were already connected to, as to whether we're going to do another innovation grant solicitation or whether we're going to do another iteration of the working group. But not that we know of at this point. One of the things that we're planning to do is, as these projects move forward, is to do a lot of PR and publicity on them to try to stimulate other groups to see that they could replicate a similar model. So I feel like that chapter has not yet been written on how these things are gonna how this will spread. So I'm expecting that there will be some viral things that will happen, but we're just not quite at that point.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is for both presenters. Can you expand a little bit on the language component of your outreach work? Shauna, would you like to start?
Sure. The language component meaning other languages?
Yes,
or
that means multi.
Okay, so we clearly know that there are other languages spoken besides English, and so making resources available became a priority for our office actually last year before the 2019 home show. We worked with Nicole here to help translate some materials into Spanish, and we also have a native Portuguese speaker in our office as well, so we were able to translate materials into Portuguese as well before the home show. Unfortunately, those materials aren't on our website yet because we're in the process of making some edits to the page that's taking a little bit longer than we had hoped, but those resources should be available by the end of the year on our website. So we feel, you know, it definitely was a priority of ours this year to make sure that those materials were available. So specifically related to community solar, though, we did translate the brochure into Spanish that we created, and that will be available on the Community Solar Marketplace when it's available, when that's online.
In our Solar 2.0 group, we did have several groups that work in the Latino community, and we're very interested in the work that we are doing. We have not yet produced materials that we will be translating into other languages, but the African American Alliance for Home Ownership has formed a partnership with an organization in Washington County called Bienestar, which works with the Latino community in that area and working on housing issues in that area. So that will probably be one of the next things that we do, is to figure out not just how we translate you know, just the language of whatever materials we come up with, but how we start really doing some deep engagement with the Spanish-speaking community.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is for both presenters, so I'll start with you, Shauna. Did the topic of resiliency, including for situations of disaster, come up during the community input process of surveys?
I wish it had. It wasn't a question that we specifically asked. We developed the survey along with several organizations, not just internally here at OER. We worked with the City of Providence's Sustainability Office, as well as National Grid. National Grid was generous enough to donate their time to help us deploy the survey directly to their customers, which actually saved us money on hiring a third party, so we were greatly appreciative of that. But we didn't really get to any questions related to resiliency. I feel like that's probably a next step after this grant, is to think about or to work with customers to think about their own resiliency at their own homes, which is definitely something that's a priority of our office going forward. It just unfortunately didn't come up with our specific outreach for the survey.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that one as well. The answer in Oregon for the work that we did and the work that Energy Trust generally is doing is yes, yes, and yes. That is a big topic of conversation here for two reasons. First of all, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, which the experts say is coming sometime in the next 50 years and is going to be a big one and will knock power out for possibly several months in this area, is a topic of a lot of conversation. And then the other thing that has been happening more recently are wildfire preparations. And the utilities have, one in particular, have started discussing the possibility of shutting off power as a last resort in a couple places around the state in case, in order to prevent a situation like we saw in California last summer. And so the idea of using solar to keep vulnerable populations, using solar and batteries to keep vulnerable populations powered in an outage situation is something that comes up all the time, particularly vulnerable populations living in low-income multifamily buildings. So yes, this is a very big topic of conversation. You rarely have a conversation about solar without discussing the topic of resilience.
Great, thank you. So the next question is also for both of our presenters. What resources are available, state, county, or utility-wide, to identify LMI stakeholders? So,
go ahead, Shauna.
So this is certainly a challenge that National Grid has had especially after our most recent rate case, which happened last fall. It became incredibly apparent that more work needed to be done on engaging LMI customers. And so they actually earmarked funding for a new position at National Grid, specifically focused on LMI-related topics. She just started a couple of months ago and has spent the summer coming up to speed, so we've been engaging her with some of our community solar efforts. But that's just an example of sort of an identification of a need and then a rather immediate solution to the problem, not an overall solution, but a part of the solution. And so a realization of what the problem was. So I think it's ongoing, continuing to identify those customers and subscribing them to the or enrolling them into the low and moderate income rate code here in Rhode Island.
I've got two answers to that question based on our experience here. The first one is the utilities. Both of our investor-owned utilities here have people who work specifically with low-income families, and we found those people to be tremendous resources and have really good understanding of issues there and who those people are, where they are, where they're living. There are also some nonprofits in the community who work very specifically on low and moderate income energy issues, and those people were also tremendous resources for us. And then the third is CAP agencies, community action programs, who work on all sorts of issues for low and moderate income families related to food and healthcare and various other things, and they work on energy issues and are also really good resources on this in this area as well.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for questions. I'm going to give each speaker just a couple of moments to say anything they haven't had a chance to say yet or to reemphasize any key points. Betsy, we can start with you.
Sure. The other thing that I felt like I should mention, and I'm glad to have the opportunity, is this effort is not the only thing that Energy Trust is doing in this area. We're working on a higher than standard incentive for moderate income families. We'll be rolling that out next month. And as I mentioned, the state has a 10% carve out on community solar. So we're looking at this from a variety of ways. The thing that I focused on today was the very specific outreach effort that we did and the innovation grants. And also we have just, I just wanted to emphasize how much we've really enjoyed doing the work over the past few years.
I would echo that too. This work has been really amazing over the past couple of years, and just engaging with all sorts of stakeholders and learning about just what people need to know about solar, community solar, in order to make a decision. I would say the overall stakeholder process has been something that I feel like OER and a lot of the energy organizations across the state do a very good job with outreach, but it's always something that we could do better. There's other people out there that we could always engage. So I'm hopeful that our community solar marketplace, once we've got that up and running and can spread the word about that, will be a flexible place to go to learn more about community solar and how LMI customers can participate. And that hopefully that document or that website will always be evolving based on needs that are identified over the course of the years that community solar is around.
Great, thank you to both of you very much for sharing all of your experiences and your innovative projects and ideas and models and lessons learned with us. It's incredibly valuable, not just the work that you're doing in your communities, but being able to share this information with other organizations or groups that are wanting to start similar work. As Sam mentioned at the start of our webinar, this webinar has been recorded. You will receive the audio file within the next 2 days. It will also be available on our website. You can also visit our website to sign up for our newsletter to receive more information and updates on Shauna and Betsy's work, as well as our other state members. You can also find us on Facebook and at Twitter at CESA_news. Our webinar schedule is on the screen. Please visit our website to register and to learn more about our upcoming webinars. We will now conclude today's webinar, State Strategies for Working with Low-Income Community Groups on Solar. Thank you again to our speakers, Shauna Beland and Betsy Coffman, and to our audience for joining us today. Goodbye.